Sorry,
Night
what were you saying,
Landisman is
Grant?
kind of like Night Landisman is kind of like maximum Chad, right?
He is. I mean, the image of him. I mean, it does seem like it was a kind of a generational shift thing because he was probably like a nasty pervert for so long, but like older women were like, "Oh, that's just Night. He's gross or whatever." But
I mean, I don't really know much about him, but a friend of mine used to work for him, and she's younger. She's like in her early 30s, and that's like literally what she said. She's like, "Oh, it's just Night." She's like, I could see why some people might be rubbed the wrong way, but he's totally harmless.
that's what I figured. I mean, it seemed like he got fucked, and like,
I mean,
I
he's
mean,
fine. I think he's
yeah,
chilling.
yeah, he's fine. It was just
He's
such
old,
a.
like,
I just like love the image of him being like at lunch with the new assistant editor or whatever, and he'd be like, "Hey, so how big's your boyfriend's dick?" That's like I remember this one girl was like, "Yeah, he would always ask me if my boyfriend fucked me good enough." I'd be like, "All right, yeah, it's probably like inappropriate work, but it's the art world. You're not
that is,
working at IBM."
yeah, that's true. That is pretty inappropriate, but it's funny.
I mean, and then like the fact I mean, I used to see Knight, all the fucking time, and I didn't even know who he was, but he just cut such an like unmistakable fucking image. Like he's this little like elvish creature looking guy in a bright red suit. And then the article comes out in the Times or whatever, and it's like Knight Landsman, art forum publisher, asking all the girls if their boyfriends have big dicks, and then like the picture of him, I'm like, holy fucking shit. It's like it's just such a incredible mental image to see this like small mystical magical little creature man going
Yeah, the
around
dude
the
was a
art form.
visionary.
He was absolutely.
He was a
I mean,
visionary. I mean, I'm
ma-
not I'm not like an art forum fanboy or anything. I'll let the record show that I never read art forum. But yeah, the dude had chops
yeah.
for sure.
I mean, it was a better magazine under his reign. I think that's indisputable.
There is a
And
kind of it's like it's symbolic of a larger problem, which is that like kind of professional roles that require both like interpersonal mediation and some sort of like long-term vision for like the improvement of your responsibilities. The boomers were like the last generation that were good at it, and they knew it, so they like really held out in the workplace for so long, and a lot of them are still there. Like we still like obviously like 2024 is going to be Trump and Biden. Can you get more symbolic than that?
right.
Like of course it takes the millennials, because they're totally helpless in a lot of ways. It takes the millennials to like charge people with like sexual harassment claims to finally get like their hands on like professional senior level jobs, you know?
Yeah, I think that's
And
what it was.
then they just like ruin it. It's like the boomers knew the whole time that they wouldn't be able to do it. But it's on the boomers for not really transmitting that generational experience and not
Yeah,
and
it's
being
like
terrible teachers.
what they had in terms of like personal competence, they lacked in pedagogy or whatever.
Totally, totally. No, the
Yeah.
boomers were the worst teachers of all time. But we live in their world, so there's that,
Yeah.
you know.
And on that note, I might as well introduce the show. Welcome back to another episode of System of Systems by Safety Propaganda. These are your hosts, Adam Lair.
And Will Sampson.
And we have a friend of mine on the show tonight, Mr. Grant Tyler. He is the online editor of Caesura, as well as curator of a new gallery space in Los Angeles. The name's escaping me. What was it, Grant?
Imperial.
Imperial. So yeah, let's start with your foray into that. Um, the gallery's been open since December, I think I read.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah, I
yeah, go ahead.
I I mean, I was writing a lot of criticism before I started the gallery. I've never worked in a gallery before. I kind of don't really, I mean, in a lot of ways, I don't know what I'm doing, but that doesn't mean I have any less confidence or anything. But it comes really from my criticism because I like the thing that I would do most as a critic is actually like go to artist studios, not like go to shows and write about them. Though most of my published writing ended up being, at least with Caesura, was like reviews. But more than that, I like to just like spend time with artists in their studios and talk to them about what they were doing because I think that that's helpful. That's just kind of like a basically helpful thing. And artists would ask like people that I would go back again and again. People would ask me to come back and look at what they're working on and talk to them about it. And I'd get more and more familiar with how they make their work and, you know, all of that. And it occurred to me, I got bored basically with writing about art, with writing art criticism because it, I don't know, at the time I just kind of stopped doing it. And uh, I thought that doing like an apartment gallery, I had the opportunity. I have a cool apartment. My roommate was down, and I thought that doing a gallery would give me like a new way to approach artist studios, a new way to spend time with them, and a new way to digest what they're doing. Because now I am not just trying to articulate a particular inner development from the outside, but I'm trying to push them to further whatever that development might be for the purpose of a show. You know what I mean? So it has like an actual ends to it. Whereas I think criticism has like a sort of necessary limit on what it's capable of doing.
Yeah. I'm actually in a similar boat. I definitely don't write as much like art specific criticism as I used to. I mean, I was never like a full-time like it was never like the only thing that I covered. It was kind of more folded into a set of principles within what I write about or something. But lately, because I do this monthly column for Compact, and the first one I wrote about was like visual art kind of shit, but since then there's just been like movie reviews and book reviews and shit like that, and I don't know if that's necessarily like a boredom with art criticism so much as I'm just like having trouble accessing the importance of contemporary art in my life. It just, I don't know,
Yeah.
there's too much or something. There's a glut of like 100 new MFA grads every single year, and if I see like one more painting of like a misty magical goblin kind of creature in like a cyberpunk setting or something, I think I might fucking blow my brains out.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, good news for you. I think what I always called fantasy core, sort of like neo-surrealist thing
I like that.
um we've been living under for the past 5 or 6 years. I think that is leaving the revolving fashion of the art world. I think that's on its way out for sure. Um, but yeah, dude, I don't think you're alone. I think the two things you cited, film reviews and book reviews, film and literature seemed, at least since the pandemic, to be the two places everyone's flocked to.
Yeah.
I mean, especially the New York scene, obviously. Like that's where people are really excited. I think probably to some extent that's because during the lockdowns you couldn't go to art shows and experience art the way that you could watch a movie or read a book.
Yeah.
But I think there are other factors too. I mean, I think the like literature is getting popular again, which is crazy. Uh, but I think, I don't know why that is necessarily. I think part of it is just because it became so conservative and so stale that you could really do whatever you want there.
Yeah.
Like there was just no energy whatsoever. There was like it was just like an open field. But yeah, dude, contemporary art definitely is um by and large like really aimless and uninteresting.
Yeah, and it
Like,
almost feels like disconnected from culture in a lot of ways. Like it's like
yeah,
isolated in its own bracket, made to um what, because you think about like, I don't know, Jasper Johns or Warhol or whatever. They were artists, but they were like figures in the culture. People knew who they were, and they knew that there was an importance to that, to the work they were doing, even if they like whether they liked it or not. That I think
Right.
is the thing that art struggles with now. It seems like, on some sense, it's like more transparent than ever or bigger than ever, but it just doesn't feel like it seems like the stories that it tells are self-referential, and also a lot of it just seems like it has its head up its ass. Like it doesn't seem like it's rooted in the world that we actually are knowing and looking at. And on the
Yeah.
flip side of that, like movies especially, something really kind of switched in the last couple of years, in which there actually have been films that a lot of people watch that spoke to a lot of. I mean, I did you guys see Beau is Afraid yet? The new Ari Aster movie.
I
I
had a
haven't
feeling
now.
you're gonna bring it up. No, I haven't seen it yet. I almost went and saw it the other day because I had a feeling you would bring it up.
I gotta say, I didn't like Midsummer. You know, like it didn't
Too
speak to me.
feminist for you?
Maybe, probably, yeah. And it did the thing where it showed like a lot of the A24 artists, like when they want to show rape, they pretend like men get raped all the time. So when the guy got raped in that movie, I was like, oh, he's doing the A24 male rape
Is that like
scandal.
an A24 thing? I don't know about
Yeah,
this.
I would have to look it up, but there's at least two other directors that have shown like
Male
men
rape.
somehow getting
You should
getting
definitely do like
violated.
an Instagram, like an investigative Instagram carousel report on male rape in
I know.
A24 films. Like, what
I
does
mean,
that
that would,
mean? Like, you're about to put out this book, or no, it's a record about masculinity, not a book. I'm sure
yeah.
masculinity comes up in your book too, though. You might as well just like throw a carousel up
Very
there about
much
that.
so, yeah. I'll tell you what that book's about, because you'll definitely think it's funny. But
Hell
so
yeah, I'm
yeah,
so excited.
I went into Beau is Afraid almost with like this neutral standpoint. Like Hereditary legitimately floored me the first time I saw it. It was one of the first movies my wife and I saw together, and I remember we both just came out of the theater like, holy fucking shit, that was fucking terrifying. And it was cool. But Beau is Afraid, I'm kind of going in like sort of curious, hoping it's not just like an arty Charlie Kaufman sort of wank fest. It was absolutely amazing. Like fully immersive, abstract, hallucinatory experience that just really made to be seen in a movie theater. And a lot of, I can see like a lot of the midwit film critics are kind of giving it shit, which
You
to
just
me
call them
only
nitwit film critics?
midwits.
Midwits. Cool.
Yeah. And I just felt like he was saying everything that I think, uh in a just more like abstract kind of way.
Uh-huh.
The movie starts with this like he's being chased down the streets in his like shitty neighborhood by like frothing at the mouth criminals, and there's this really fraught relationship with women in the film, very misogynist at points, and I just was like, holy shit, like how is this thing even made? Nothing in contemporary art has like affected me in that kind of way in a
Yeah.
very 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 long time.
Yeah.
And that's what's missing.
Yeah, I mean, something you said earlier, like, I think if I mean, I don't know. This is kind of like a rigid view, but maybe it's helpful, but maybe not. But I think that if what you need is like artwork which addresses like society in like a kind of really social sense, a very outward looking sense that wants to like touch on the topics of the day or whatever, the way you're kind of describing what resonated with you with Beau is Afraid, then we might as well just stick to movies.
Yeah,
They do it better.
yeah, totally.
I think art actually has a different kind of set of responsibilities. And I think that those responsibilities could be fulfilled in like a film medium. But I think that that's it's kind of beside the point. And ultimately, like what art needs to do is actually be more cloistered, more inward looking, more navel gazing,
Yeah,
and less concerned with politics, less concerned with like kind of social questions, less concerned with sort of like the fleeting ephemera of like our degraded society. It needs to be more obsessed with itself. It needs to be more narcissistic, because the best art, at least throughout modernism, has always created itself sort of according to its own logic and almost in a vacuum. Like you look at like this is like the genius of Cezanne, for instance, like that
Yeah.
Cezanne created like an entire language of his own out of his own subjective experience representing forms on a canvas. Like he was able to reduce weight to like abstract principles of the application of paint on a surface. That is like so disconnected from the concerns of the late 19th century politically and socially. It's only about painting. That's all it's about. And he made some of the greatest paintings of all time. And then it's up for me or whoever, a critic really, to be able to point out what's significant about how those things are executed, how it is that it says something about the modern mind, about subjectivity, about where human beings are in history. But that whole dynamic is happening on a totally different level. You know what I mean? The problem with contemporary art now is that it's totally given up on that pursuit, actually. Is that it actually thinks, like you suggested, it thinks it can be social, it thinks it can like
Yeah.
participate in like the problems of the day, but at the end of the day it's not. It's still this really cloistered aristocratic thing that people can't relate to. You know what I mean? And so it's
Yeah.
like it's in like a kind of escrow. It's like neither here nor there.
Yeah. And it's like um the whole loop, there's like a loop of it. There's like there's like a dialectic that almost becomes annoying between like the way the curator like tells you what the work is supposed to be about,
Yeah.
and that becomes like how it's justified, and then the critic just sort of reiterates the curatorial thesis,
Yeah.
and no one then is able to just experience the image or the object or whatever without that sort of clouding their sensory judgment. Oh, I'm supposed to see this and it's supposed to mean this. Um,
Yeah.
and there
Yeah.
it
Yeah. Yeah.
is.
No, totally. I mean, that's why I think, funny enough, some of the best contemporary artists now, again, are abstract painters. And they're
Absolutely.
abstract painters who are not necessarily like modernists by any means, but like they never had the option to like think about their work in terms of content. Like that's just not on the table. And so I think you end up getting like a kind of fast track to a real lesson in what art's all about, which is experience, which is like art for itself, in itself, disconnected from everything else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well, one artist that you showed recently, um, or no, you're currently showing, who
Hmm.
looks rather
Johann.
interesting in this way. Yeah, Johann Munn.
Yes.
Is this a sort of criteria that you're trying to explore in this gallery project you've come up with?
I mean, yes, and I mean, kind of. I mean, I basically what I'm trying to explore is the same thing that I prioritize in my writing, which is just that the only thing that matters in art at the end of the day is the experience that you have with it in person. Like that maybe sounds obvious, but really I think people don't know how to stand in front of a work of art and experience it. I think they've forgotten to, and so we come up with all these social or political or these other like quote unquote like overdetermined elements that kind of make up the work, and we kind of beat around the bush by throwing that shit around, and we never give ourselves the opportunity to just let a work of art resonate,
Mm-hmm.
just let it be, to really like to like enter into it in a kind of naive way, and let that experience happen. And so that's the way that I approach art in general. That's the way that I approach art in criticism, and that's the way that I approach art with this gallery. Is that that's what's important to me. Is that if I do that with a work of art, that it opens up itself to me, that I can have that experience with it. I think when you approach art that way, certain things start to jump out at you, and so I don't have any like principles about like, yeah, I'm only going to show young abstract painters or something. But I do, the one principle I guess that I do have is that I can have like this sort of really powerful immediate experience with it. That I can go like into like a contemplation with the object and have this kind of lasting relationship with it in an aesthetic way, not in a kind of intellectualized way.
Yeah. No, it's this making sense to me right now because I mean I barely go around to the shows anymore.
Mm.
Um Not because I'm like actively avoiding it or anything. It's just I live way out in Queens and it's a pain in the ass to get there and I'm busy. But I did leave the house to go see the McCarthy Oiland show at Gagosian.
Mm.
And it was good, but it also kind of left me a little disappointed, maybe because I had already projected too many expectations onto it. But
Hmm.
down the street from it, unbeknownst to me, there was a Tony Ursler solo show at a gallery that I typically hate but can't remember the name of. But anyways, I love Tony Ursler. So I walked in and at first he just had those wall pieces, you know, with the robotic faces, the electronics going on. That was fine. I've seen that a million times. But in the back, he had this new video installation piece set up that was all these different plexiglasses with different videos being projected onto them at once. And I was high as a kite too, which helped.
On what?
Um, on just edibles.
Uh-huh.
And it was absolutely fucking amazing. And honestly got like no press or anything. I've been the only one I think like telling my friends to go check this thing out. And I
Uh-huh.
think actually that is quite helpful when it comes to visual art to go in to not look at like what's showing and to just like
Yeah.
go out and accidentally see something is kind of the way that it best works on the
Yeah, I mean,
senses.
that's when I said naivete, like I would really, really underscore that. I think that's so important to experiencing art. I think especially the deeper you get into like being a art world professional, the more you don't allow yourself to kind of have an open mind about what you're experiencing. It's like you said with the Albert Olin Paul McCarthy shows, those are artists whose names are being thrown around so much, especially right now, in like a sort of de-wokifying moment. It's like
Right.
let's go for the bad boys. Let's go for the kind of really broy dudes. And so you have all this like cultural baggage wrapped up in it, and like you said, it just doesn't work that way. And like the reality is you have to have a really kind of childlike naivete almost, and you have to kind of trust just how a thing makes you feel, and you have to be articulate enough um to comprehend that experience, to be able to
Well,
sit with it and let it kind of really find full fruition or something.
did you see anything in the last year that you felt like did you what were the things that you saw this year that had an impact that
That
lingered?
blew me away. You know
Yeah.
what fucked me up, honestly, is um this might come off as like kind of cringe, but I don't really care. There
Yeah.
was a Giacometti show at the MFAH in Houston.
Yeah, I
It
love
blew
him.
my mind. It
Where
really
was it?
did. The Museum of Fine Arts, Houston.
Oh, sick.
Um, yeah, I mean, I've been interested in Giacometti before, but I think because he's one of those artists whose reputation really precedes him, and like Picasso or Van Gogh or something, he's one of those people where I feel like you have this kind of really static image of, okay, he makes these kind of heavy like brass sculptures that are really tall and skinny of figures walking. And so you have like almost a JPEG in your head of like what you're gonna see. And usually like if you don't sensitize yourself to what you're standing in front of, like that's all you're gonna have is just like okay, these are tall, skinny metal sculptures. But I don't know, there was actually like such a nuance in the way that he presents his faces and such a like intensity with the way that he works through his materials and a real variety in this show at least of like approaches to very simple forms. And they showed also these drawings of his that I didn't even know he'd ever made. He was making these sort of pencil landscape drawings that were really gorgeous and like incredible economy of marks. It's like it was just like very simple but really really powerful stuff. That blew me away. That was a great show, I thought. um, what else have I seen that was cool? Oh, Cy Twombly at the Getty
Oh
here in
fuck, I
LA.
love Twombly. That's
The
my
Twombly's one of
man.
my favorites.
Yeah, that's
Twombly's
my.
the man for sure.
I mean, that's like it's still to this day, I think the most fucked up looking. Like I don't care how many like bloody pussies I see in like figurative paintings or whatever. There's nothing to me that's like more shocking and jarring than Twombly's visual lexicon. Like,
Yeah.
I love when John Waters says that Twombly's his favorite artist because it most enrages like normies, like when you try to explain to them that it's art. You know, he tells this story about how his dad saw Twombly on his wall and his dad just got like mad, like, why the fuck would anyone buy that? That shit ain't art. You know, like because it just looks like so. I mean, and a lot of the abstract painters, like I mean, it was incredibly radical and upsetting to a lot of people at the time. But Twombly, I
Yeah.
feel, even compared to the other abstract painters, looks incredibly harsh and chaotic.
Well, he is hard. Well, yeah, I mean I can understand where you're coming from. I think it would be good to set him apart from like Duchamp though, because Duchamp is somebody who sought to piss people off the way that you're talking about. That was the
Yeah, yeah,
point.
yeah, yeah. With Twombly, it's unintentional.
With Twombly, it's not I mean, he probably figured he would piss people off, but it just wasn't the point, you know?
Yeah, it's
The
not
point
what got him
was
off.
what got him off was making the best art he could possibly make as simply and efficiently as possible. Like it's about getting to the point, and that point needs to be really moving and kind of cosmically profound. And his obsession with Greek culture like didn't hinder that. It only brought it out into, it made it stronger. And yeah, I mean, I think there are very few Twombly works that I've seen in my life that didn't profoundly move me. Like it's pretty consistent that I find his work amazing. I see, yeah, but they did a show. There were two shows. There was a Getty show, which was pretty good. I mean, I actually thought it could be better, but they had some hits like later, like his Leda and the Swan, that's really famous. And then they had some other ones, the Rings of the Islands, something I don't remember. These kind of teal and orange paintings from the 80s, which were I'd never seen before and like totally blew me away. The most insane color palette I'd ever seen in my life. Like these things just radiated. They just like burned up in front of you. And then Gagosian did like a show to parallel that. And then I also like right after that I flew to Chicago, and Chicago has a huge collection of his sculpture. And then I went to this like Twombly Gallery in Houston right after that. So I was like very Twombly'd out, and the whole thing was total bliss for me. He's like one of my favorites. But
Yes, same.
yeah.
And the other thing I really love about him is that he worked in the U.S. Army as a cryptologist, which he
Oh,
says, yeah, which he says was a formative experience for how he developed his style. And to me is
Really?
very cool because he literally was working in information warfare. And it's like, so even though I might just be projecting it, I can't help but see his work as a kind of subtle hypnotic brainwashing technique, something like if
Whoa.
you just stare at it for a long time, it just fucking vacates your brain and leaves you to open to
Yes, Adam, thank you.
suggestion.
Okay,
Yeah,
exactly. That is what art ought to do. I'm fine with admitting that. Great art is a hypnotic brainwashing technique.
yeah,
You know, it
yeah.
should do that. It should do that. You know what
Yep.
art there's this I've been thinking about this Con a lot, or Cohen, or however you say it, from I think it's Bill Evans, the jazz piano player. He's talking about improvising. He says, don't just play something, sit there. I feel like art
Absolutely.
critics could take a page from that book, you know? Don't just say something, sit there.
Yep. Yep. And certainly those jazz guys and the abstract expressionists had a lot of sympathy for one another. I
Oh
mean, it's
yeah.
crazy to think how much amazing shit was happening in such a small area of time. Life moves simultaneously faster, but it also like nothing happens at the same time. We're in this like repetitive, ultra repetitive era with tons and tons and tons of information, but um, very few like new things. Like think
Yeah.
about like I mean, let's just say like something like the first Kanye West album is
Mhm.
now as old as like the first Sex Pistols album would have been when I was like 7 years old or whatever. So in that 20 years, 77 to 97, so much changed so fast. And
Right.
then we're like Kanye's still the biggest star in the entire world right now. Like um things just move differently now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the acceleration theory kind of botches a lot of things. Of course, to some extent, like the Industrial Revolution has just had all these sort of like upgrades. It's like system updates, you know?
Yeah.
And so we have like the four waves of industrial revolution, and the last one's like the digital industrial revolution. I don't know, maybe the AI revolution is going to like justify being another industrial revolution or something. But really, the way that, you know, all history isn't created equal. So the idea that it's just like ramping up since the industrial revolution, things are just getting faster and faster. I think that that kind of botches a lot. Instead, you could think about history as a series of high water marks in which, you know, like they're parallels like your own life. Like, you know, we all have those experiences in life where sometimes your girlfriend breaks up with you, you lose your job, and you move states within like a month. Just like happens. Sometimes things happen. Everything, all the patterns that you got used to, everything gets thrown up in the air, and with no time at all to think about it, you have to suddenly make all these consequential decisions, which are going to determine like the foreseeable future. And you have
Yeah.
to very quickly convince yourself what are your values and how are you going to act on those values given the opportunities that are in front of you. Now that happens in our personal lives, but that also happens historically. And you
Yeah.
could say that like I would say that the most significant period for our lives that was like that was like the late 60s, 68 to 72. That created the kind of reality we've been living in since. The next most important thing was Trump's election. Like, definitely 2016 is profoundly consequential in a lot of ways. And I don't think that it's like Trump leading it. I think Trump is a symptom of like a really deep and quick social change. I think it starts in 2008, and I think Trump is like the sort of political expression of it. But I think there's a way that you can see it happening in art too. I think that it's all pervasive, and so like to your point, it certain like to try to map out certain timescales. It feels like really bizarre for me to think that Kanye's first album came out 20 years ago. I mean, I'm only 25. Kanye's been like a kind of stable figure my whole life, but he feels very 21st century, and that just feels weird to say. But like, think about like Kanye pre-Trump versus Kanye post-Trump, or Kanye pre 2008
That's
versus
true.
Kanye now. That's an even more dramatic change.
That's true.
As like
That's
our
very
cultural
true.
lightning rod example that we have, like what came out in like 2012? Was that Twisted Beautiful Fantasy or whatever?
That was
Like that.
Yeezus.
Well,
Oh,
that's
that's
just
right.
before
Yeezus is
Yeezus.
Oh,
2013.
just before Yeezus. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the 2012 is like a weird in between space
But
for
it's
me.
something
Right.
like that, right? And now we have
Yeah.
like Kanye now. Like I don't know. This is like a really ridiculous metaphor that I'm trying, that I'm trying to mark out here, but you get my drift. I'm like, I think that what really happens is that we have these intense periods of really deep and rapid transformation, which end up being more consequential than the 50 years that pass between them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But I don't know. The other thing with like 2016 is negative or positive or not, I think Trump did sort of signify um a moment of uh, a hope that like something was possible, you know.
Yeah,
It,
yeah, yeah,
there was just like a mind-blowingness about it.
totally.
Like that if people want to make their favorite reality television show host president, they'll fucking do it. And I'll always think that there's something like glorious and beautiful about that. Um, but
Well, I mean,
uh,
I don't want to get too bogged down in politics, but I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
resist to a certain extent. And I mean, he had a project that he ran on. He had a campaign that was different that set him apart from other candidates, and he ran on it and he promised he'd follow through on it. That's actually a very rare thing for politicians, but let's not forget that Bernie did the same thing. Like Bernie
yeah,
and Trump really are twin flames of a deeper social reality that shifted. They really
yeah,
are
yeah,
expressions of a sort of breaking the old mold and looking for something new. I think it's ironic that they're both boomers.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course,
That's
of
saying something
course.
really serious about the state of our future. But nonetheless, I think that there's a way that I guess to bring this back into the conversation of art, that the phase that we just lived through for the past 50 years of 68 to 72 through 2008 to Trump's election, that whole, which I would call the neoliberal era, right? The art component to the neoliberal era is contemporary art, capital C contemporary art. That's
Yeah,
the art that defines that epoch, and that's the art that died. Here's like one of my fun points in my that I try to write about here and there. I don't think contemporary art has a future. I think contemporary art's over, and I think there are a number of ways that it is time for something new in art to take its place. And I don't think there's a lot of clarity about what that would look like, but I do think that it's necessary and it should be kind of explicitly considered both by critics and artists and dealers and everybody.
absolutely. I mean, it already has changed to an extent. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, my argument is always that that's what post-internet was.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Post-internet art, and to an extent, what we're doing right now, having this conversation to be broadcast and spliced together with weird music, is almost like a post-internet art, where it's like totally outside an institutional framework, but still people are consuming it and getting
Yeah,
something out of it.
it's maybe not post-internet art, but it's definitely post-internet.
It's post internet, possibly. Fuck, I had something else on my mind that I was gonna say. Uh, oh yeah. So, I've been Julian Jacob Neer, the Swiss
Yeah,
artist.
yeah.
He reached out to me because he wanted me to do an essay for this magazine he was doing. At first, I thought I was too busy, but the fee that the magazine was offering was just like too fucktardedly high to say no. So, anyways, him and I have been chatting about his work, and what I find interesting about him is he's like totally working in the context of contemporary art in Berlin, which is like, you know, a contemporary art city in a lot of ways. But
Definitely.
he says he has no interest in contemporary art anymore, and that his whole practice is basically like um trying to work in an art context without making art at all. Uh, which
I mean, I don't know. That sounds a little pretentious to me because he
yeah,
definitely
yeah,
makes
yeah.
art. I've seen his art and it's art.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know, but it was still funny. It was still interesting hearing him trying to flesh out these ideas, like almost like the idea of being a contemporary artist is something kind of corny that he wants to reject.
It is corny.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Like the
I know.
world
I mean,
doesn't
the
need any
era
more
where like being an
artists.
artist is something admirable is, thank God, is over. Like we really need to, like, like every time it's every once in a while it's good to like step away from the parties, step away from the attention, and like leave society, go soul searching. Art needs to do that for sure.
Art needs to
You know
leave
what I mean?
society. Yeah.
Art needs to leave society for a sec, for sure. It should be humiliating to be an artist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, I don't like even defining myself as an artist, even though I guess there is an extent of it to which I do. But I'm always trying to find like definitions that can apply that have nothing to do with, because I really don't think about like writing a book or something as like, oh, this is a this is a
As being a
creation
writer?
of an artwork. Yeah, like this is like a creative act. I mean, it is, but
Yeah.
but I don't know, like the intent. There's not the intentionality there or something, and like um, I'm kind of interested if it's possible to be creative outside of an art context in any kind of way. I guess that's probably happening,
Oh yeah,
maybe.
of course. I
Um,
mean,
yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I think like the idea even of what art is now is really um slippery because of a lot of kind of like some really bad inheritance, let's just say. I wrote an essay about this called Art and Freedom, which appeared in Caesura probably
Oh
like
yeah,
two
yeah, I
years
read
ago.
that one.
And I in it I make this argument about Roland Barthes had this he wrote this book that basically arguing to liquidate literary criticism and literature. So he thought that the best literature was its own literary critic, that it had literary criticism built in. And on the other hand, if you wrote the best literary criticism, it itself would be literature. So you could
Yeah,
take this out of literature and into art. You could say that the best art is its own critic, and that the best art criticism would actually, if you pushed it to its limit, would just become art. Now, that's like an actual historical dynamic that ought to be taken seriously. Like the entire project of the avant-garde really problematizes that those relationships. It really does. And it's not like an accident that Roland Barthes decided to put some pressure on this. However, I think there is a lot that gets lost if you simply identify art and criticism. Because actually what the history of the avant-garde, the arc of it was driven by was the interrelationship between them, but the distinction between them. They're distinct entities, they're distinct practices, but they're interdependent and they feed off each other in a productive way. Critics make art better and good art makes better critics. That's how that works. And so to liquidate them together, you end up getting bad art and bad criticism. Or in the case of how history actually unfolded, you get art that thinks it's critical and you get criticism that's actually just gossip journalism, right? Like,
right,
and that no one fucking reads. And
right.
the art is like so heady and full of itself that you don't even care to give it too much attention. Because, like you said, you can just read a short wall text that some like BFA grad who's getting paid nothing by the museum to write wrote, and you think about it for 2 seconds and you forget about it and you go on your day. You have way more fun going to the fucking movie theater than experiencing that. I mean, yeah, the whole thing. It threw out the baby with the bathwater. This is like Duchamp obviously is like a great exponent of this kind of practice, and what is contemporary art in general, if not Duchampian. I think like that event that art and criticism were liquidated into each other ought to be really interrogated by the next generation. That should really be at the front of many artists' minds of what are the limits actually of my responsibilities as an artist, because there are some. The artist isn't meant to change the world. If you want to change the world, stop making art, please.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Start a game show and then run for
Start a
president.
podcast.
um, yeah, like, um, fuck. I keep losing my train of thought. But it sounds like that Roland Barthes concept is almost like an early basis for the whole idea, the whole CCRU thing, theory fiction, to read to read fiction as a form of theory or
Yeah.
reality, and to
Yeah. Yeah.
read
Yeah.
theory and reality as a kind of fiction. And I honestly think that's like an inbuilt thing. I don't think that's even avoidable. Like if you read like Grail Marcus Lipstick Traces or whatever, it's a work of like history to a large degree, but how can you also not like
Well, history
enjoy
is an
it?
art form in and of itself. So I mean, there's
Yeah. There you
that.
go.
Yeah.
But
The historian is not an artist, and you know what? Also, the critic and the historian have nothing in common
mm,
at all. Nothing, nothing at all. You know what the deeper lineage of that is, though? I mean, you're right to say that, like, it's just there. Like, of course it is. Like, it'd be foolish to pretend that it's not. But there's still a reasonable extent to which we can distinguish between literature and literature criticism. I think the greatest exponents of it were the surrealists, actually, the original surrealists. Obviously, CCRU is really influenced by Bataille, which is a
yeah.
particular strand of that. But you could go back and read one of my favorite books of all time is Mad Love by Andre Breton, and in it he basically gives his theory of art as a parallel to his theory of what it is to fall in love, in Freudian terms, but also in poetic terms. And the whole book moves very effortless. I mean, he's a master poet, and moves very effortlessly between poetry about his experience of falling in love with this woman, Jacqueline de Lumba, and what it means to make art at all. And it's totally in lockstep for him. They're different faces of the same soul, you know? And so yeah, I mean it's there. But I think when you're approaching your task as an artist or you're approaching your task as a critic, you need to be very clear about what your goals are and what the limits of your project are. And I think if you don't have those kind of priorities straight off the bat, you end up just making stupid shit.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hardest part of all of this. I struggle with it, you know. My friend Lionel Mounds, the artist, he even asked me point blank once, like, so what are you trying to do? And I was like, I don't fucking know, man. You know, I'm just
Yeah.
chilling. I
Yeah.
just say what's on my mind. And he's like, yeah, but what's your goal? What's your aim? And he
Yeah.
really made me think about it. And I think that's kind of why I wrote that whole fucking manifesto thing, is I was trying to just like write out loud what the whole point of me having a platform is, or
Yeah.
what it is that I'm trying to communicate. And that is the fucking thing no one thinks about. I
Yeah.
mean, if we want to go to like, you know, that column you made about gossip columns masquerading as art or art criticism, fucking what's his face, Crumps,
Uh-huh.
I hate bringing him up because he's such an asshole, but like the guy literally writes gossip columns, and that would be fine. There's always, you know, people are always going to read that shit. People love gossip, but he defines himself as a quote unquote text artist. And I was like, wait, you mean a writer? But I'm like, how the fuck is Celine okay calling himself a writer, but the gossip columnist from Substack has to be a text artist? But
You know,
anyhow,
but to his credit, I literally went to school for sound art,
I
not music.
didn't know that.
Yeah, dude.
How
Used
come
to be a
you
synth head.
damn. What kind of
I'll
music
send
were
you
you
some stuff.
into? Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's retarded. Shit's fucking stupid, man.
I
People
mean,
have their
that's
heads
kind
so far up their own asses. It's
dude, that's
insane.
kind of the whole moment that I soured on the Dime Square scene that was somewhat trying to absorb me into it. Is like it became at that clear at that point that none of these people actually do anything or make anything,
Yeah.
but are all desperate to just read about themselves on either a Substack or hear their name on a fucking podcast.
You know what's funny is since I feel like in the last like few months, everyone has reached that conclusion. Like that's the definitive that's what it looks like as a dead phenomenon, is that it was always just about attention.
Yeah.
I wonder, maybe, I mean, I don't really know. I wasn't there. I've never lived in New York, thank God. But you know, there some of the people who I've met who are like around, some of them are friends of mine, and I really admire them. I think they're geniuses. Yeah, maybe they need to have better work ethics for sure in a couple of cases, but I don't know. I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss it.
No, there's
I
always
think
going
I
to
think
be
I
people that
think
are
in
good.
any situation these days, people are just fucking attention whores. Like
Yeah, I'm
that's
very
pretty
guilty of that
normal.
myself. Very,
What's
very
that?
fucking guilty of that.
Yeah, I mean, me too. We all are. We'd be liars to act like that's not true.
Yeah, it
But
feels very good, you know? And of course, there's a part of me that always laments the fact that when people come up to me in public, they'll like, oh, I heard you on a podcast, or I read a fucking tweet that you wrote. And it's like, oh, so you've never actually read anything that I've done. You just know me as some fucking hollow internet personality. Um, but that's okay. That's just how people like people don't that's how people engage with content now. That's
yeah, yeah.
you know, you can't get too bummed out about these kinds of things.
I mean, I think to a certain extent, this stuff's not new. I mean, even if you were a publishing writer in a newspaper or a magazine and you had something interesting to say, most of the people, if anybody like knew your name, like they probably couldn't tell you what you think. You really only ever have like a handful of audience members who you're really kind of in dialogue with. But
Yeah.
that's okay. I mean, would you really want it any other way? That sounds like really like a stressful. If like your entire audience was really devoted to what you had to say, that sounds like you have like a cult on your hands. It sounds like it would get out of hand really quickly.
Dude, trust me, we had Billy Corgan on this podcast recently, and he has
Oh
an
wow.
entire
I'm
message
filling some
board.
big shoes. That's crazy.
Yeah, dude, he read my first
Another
book.
Las Vegas legend. You know, I'm from Las
Yes.
Vegas and he lives there.
He lives in Vegas?
You didn't know that? Yeah,
I thought
dude.
he still lives in Chicago, or maybe he splits his time.
I don't know. He has a house in Vegas. He definitely lives
Cool.
in Vegas. He might have
Yeah.
another place in Chicago, but
Yeah, because he owns a bookstore in Highland Park.
oh, I
Um,
didn't know that.
and that's why he initially reached out to me because he read Communions and wanted to sell it at his store. It was the craziest email I've ever gotten in my fucking life. But
Yeah,
he
I've seen
has
myself probably.
my I've told this story before, but my dad took me to see the Smashing Pumpkins when I was like 8. He's like a
Hmm.
huge fan. So like when I sent him that email, that was like the most proud he's ever been his entire life. When
Hell
we
yeah.
went to his birthday party last year, he had the email printed out. He was showing it to all his frat brothers.
That's so tight. Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, good for you. Those are the
Yeah.
moments that matter.
Oh,
Fuck the likes, dude.
absolutely. Yeah, no, that is kind of what makes it all matter. Like earning the respect of people you admire. Like a
Yeah.
lot of people that I look up to, I count as friends now. And that's way more validating than whatever, 100,000 likes on a Substack article. But Billy, he has like an entire message board of his fans just bitching about everything he says and does. I think that does sound incredibly awful to be like that much of a mass culture figure where you can't even just like do an interview without having every single one of your words dissected by your autistic fan base.
Yeah, it sounds like horrible. Sounds like so horrible.
Nightmare.
Yeah. Being a celebrity in general sounds like really horrible.
Yep. I think that's why Kanye has learned how to what makes him interesting, he's kind of learned to use fame. Like I think like yeah, he's a rapper and a music producer and he does cool stuff, but it's the thing that's most interesting about him to me is the way that he manipulates his own fame, his own platform.
Yeah, he has this strategy which I think is kind of admirable where he explodes and then goes dead silent.
It's
You know,
very
like we're in
sick.
that
Yeah.
dead silent phase. And every time he explodes, everyone's like, it's over. Everyone's always saying, "That's it. That's the last straw." Like he's like, "I'm gonna let you finish," but Beyonce is the best album of all time, and everyone was like, "It's over." And then like literally every 2 years since then, he does it again and again and again, and he just keeps coming back. Like it's like a weed that you can never pull the root out entirely. Like
Yeah.
like the culture industry is constantly just like plucking the top part of the weed, and then he just keeps growing back even bigger than before.
Yeah. He's just like, and he's like a mass, he's like an edge lord on a mass scale. Like the
Well,
fucking,
now he has, but he's become an edge lord, like because it's like fashionable to be edgy now. You know,
yeah. I think he
like
has
he
legitimate
was like interviewed
grievances,
saying
but
like he's like he said something like I'm not bipolar, I'm autistic. I thought, oh no.
oh
I was
no.
like, who the fuck did he hire from Dime Square?
Yeah, I know. Oh, I actually met this guy who was working. I met him at Moore Alex Lee Moyer's film premiere, who was
Yeah.
working with him as his stylist at that point. So like he definitely has Dime Square people
Oh
in
yeah.
his
No, for sure.
midst. But I found that Alex Jones interview to be like, once I watched it in full and I realized what he was doing, which was like saying the thing that like always hovers over right-wing online retardation.
Yeah.
They still have the taboo, which is like they're not supposed to say fully Nazi things, you know? They have to
Yeah.
like skirt around it. And then
Yeah.
Kanye is just like, he's wearing like a hood by air jacket, he's got a mask on. He's like, "Yo, but I like Nazis." And they're like, "Oh no, what he means is censorship is bad."
And it was kind of funny.
Yeah.
I mean, he did say some shit that was like, I mean, this is his thing. Is he's like I really like the guy. I have to admit, I really am a fan. But he's a dumbass. There's no question about it. He's a very useful idiot,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he has a
yeah.
bad attitude, and so he uses that to his advantage, and it's really entertaining. But you know, like there's very little cultural value when he has those episodes. When he's basically like, "Oh, you're gonna tell me what to do. I'm just gonna like push back on all the taboos." Like there's just like very little value to that. It's just kind of like, okay, here we go.
I mean, I understand it, but yeah, it's not valuable.
You know, I
But
used to work on a riverboat in Chicago. I was like a deckhand on a water taxi,
mm.
and the Captain Brandon, shout out Captain Brandon. He was this big black dude from Southside Chicago. Like you're big, Adam. That this dude would like pinch you and like you would obliterate. Like he was like the biggest dude I've ever met in my life, and tough guy. But he somehow wound up. He's like a really sweet dude. Somehow wound up working the water taxi in Chicago. Anyways, he grew up in South Shore on 79th, same place Kanye did. They grew up on the
Mm.
same block. They went to high school together, and
Whoa.
he knew him. And he said that basically the dynamic on the block back in the day was that Kanye's older cousin was in the BDs, the Black Disciples, the gang that ruled that area. And everyone knew that he was high up, the cousin was. Everyone knew that if you touched Kanye, you would get fucked up.
Yeah.
They would find you and they would fuck you up. And so Kanye was untouchable. He was at think one, he's got single child syndrome, and he's also got a smother who's like all up like
No,
yeah, he's
his
a
mom
genius
did some
artist, like
damage for reals.
like there's like all these things, and then on top of that, he lives in like a really brutal area, except he's invincible in it. Like he lives in like a hellscape. He grows up in like a total hell zone with total violence, and he walks out unscathed. No one can touch him. Think about how that formed his
Yeah.
his mind.
Hell
He's
yeah.
like this precocious, nerdy black kid that would
Totally,
absolutely be getting his ass kicked every day in any other
totally,
scenario, but no
totally.
one's fucking with him. He comes down the street with like a teddy bear backpack, excited to play video games, and like 12 guys are like, "God, I want to beat that kid up." And they're like, "Nah, man. You know whose cousin that is? Leave him be." That's fucking
Yeah, dude, it's
hilarious.
funny. It's funny. How did we get off on that?
I have
Anyways,
no idea. Dude, did you hear about fuck the Brooklyn Museum show they're doing.
What, the Picasso thing?
Yeah, it's it's
I
Pablo-matic.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Is that actually what they're titling the show?
Dude, Hannah Gadsby is curating it.
You know, I saw some shit about this on Twitter, and I just like kept scrolling, you know. So
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
know. I got
Whatever.
assigned to write about it by Compact.
of course.
Well,
So I'm
good.
yeah, I'm gonna do like a pithy article. I reached out to them to get
When does the show
like
open?
a couple weeks. I reached out to the museum to get someone on the line to just like try and justify why this is a necessary show to be doing. No one would talk to me. So they definitely know it. Like it's funny because like everybody knows on some
Pablo-matic, by
level.
the way, is like the global homo like Silicon Valley language for like um show of degenerate art or like exhibition of degenerate art that the Nazis did, you know? It's
Yeah.
like Pablo-matic. It's
It's
like
problematic
dude, come
and
on.
degenerate. Um but
I
yeah,
think
they
if it's in a couple of weeks, I'll definitely I might be in New York for the opening. I'd love to
yeah,
go with you.
and they
We could
got
talk
a
about it.
ton of big artists to do it, you know, because it's gonna be Pablo's work and then a bunch of women who are gonna like um shit on his legacy to an extent. But yeah, they got like not supposed to talk about this because it's my wife's client, but they got like Marilyn Minter and
Hmm.
Laurie Simmons,
Hmm.
Betty Tompkins, another one of her clients. Yeah, like all the big women in New York are doing it. I often
That's
think that,
cool.
yeah, like I often wonder if maybe artists don't actually look at what show they're doing. Maybe they just get offered to do a Brooklyn Museum thing.
I mean, these kind of things are like PR, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of whatever, but you know, like it's a shame. It's what I was talking about earlier. Like you're just front loading like the potential to have this really profound, beautiful, and uniquely human experience of experiencing art. You're just like at that point, you're just you're not allowing that to happen as a curator. You've made it very clear that as a curator, it's not about that for you.
yeah,
So that's nothing new. That's just like that's kind of like the status quo at this point. So the
yeah,
fact that it's like kind of socially cringy is maybe just icing on top, but it's kind of rotten from the beginning.
yeah. It's like they're telling you you're not supposed to just look at a Picasso. You are supposed to look at a Picasso and remember that he fucked a lot of young women because
Yeah,
somehow that's relevant. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, it is
yeah.
relevant. It's fucking awesome.
there we go.
Ah, God, God, Adam, you're not gonna help us here.
um,
It's look, whatever. I'm not no comment.
how do you feel about Picasso? You a fan?
Yeah, dude's a fucking genius. He's a great
Of
artist.
course, of course.
Yeah, both quantity and quality. The dude bangs. There's no question.
Did you
Um,
ever watch the Picasso at Work movie that George Franju did?
no. Is it worth
I got it.
watching?
Yeah, it's sick. Um, I got it on. I think it's Jorge Franju. I bet, but he's the guy who directed Eyes Without a Face. It was a great
Okay.
arty European horror film from the
I,
50s.
that's not. Oh, oh. I'm thinking Green Without a Cat. Chris Marker. Never mind. Sorry.
uh yeah, Eyes Without a Face is the Pedro Almodovar horror movie is like a loose remake of it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I see.
So he directed it and I bought it and I was thinking it was going to be more of like a typical documentary where they'd be interviewing other talking heads and shit like that, but actually it's just like 50 minutes of Picasso in the studio painting and once in a while like talking to the camera, but vast majority of
That's
the
sick.
film is silent. Yeah, it's really awesome, like close-ups on his skill, like close-ups on his hands as they're moving along the canvas. And what's cool about it is you really see the kind of like physical athleticism almost of what virtuosity looks like.
Yeah.
I would definitely check it out.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to. That sounds fascinating. I mean, I think Picasso's like uh he's funny because like he's like the artist of all time now, I guess. You know, like when you tell little kids like, "Oh, what's art?" It's like, "Oh, you make like a painting." Like, okay,
Yeah, he
who
superseded
painters
like
do it?
Van
It's like
Gogh.
Pablo
Yeah,
Picasso.
yeah,
I mean, whatever. I mean, it's whatever. I think like it just makes it kind of like the discussion of his work makes it just actually kind of hard to get to the point. But like I was saying, if you ever get the chance to just see, even in Pablo Matic, you'll have the opportunity. Go if you're not actually familiar with Pablo Picasso's work, go to Pablo Matic, look at whatever works they have of his there, and just really look at them. Really kind of
yeah,
let
yeah,
them do
yeah.
their thing. You'll
No,
you'll you'll learn that he's a great artist, probably.
it's true. Like when I was a teenager, one of the first artists that I discovered was Basquiat because he was so like fashionable at a certain point.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but as I got older, I almost started to think he was like corny or something because his family has really kind of they've sold the rights to his imagery like everywhere, fucking Uniqlo, Nike, whatever.
Yeah.
But uh, this show he had maybe 3 or 4 years ago at the Brandt Foundation, we
Mm.
went and there was one fucking painting, um, and it was really crude, even compared to his other work. It was like duct tape and tiny little graffiti symbols, and then like a lot of writing. And then when you
Mm.
looked really close, you realized there was so much writing that it was almost like a few pages in a book's worth. And I ended
Oh
up
well.
looking at this fucking thing for like 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And it just totally reaffirmed my belief that the guy was actually as good as people thought he was.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
and this happened to me with Dali too. Dali is like the
Oh, really?
artist that like MFA people are like led to believe is corny somehow, because kids get his posters or whatever. But when you see his paintings in person and you realize like the extent of his vision, how broad it was, guy was an absolute fucking genius, and that's the reason he's popular is because it's really fucking good. I like having these like I like having these like second epiphanies,
Yeah.
um, which I think are important when talking about art history. Because as you get more like accustomed to looking at things and you start to think of yourself as like, oh man, I'm like, I know my shit, then you'll have these like mental barriers around some of the popular people. But then you see a certain piece or something and it erases all that. It dissolves the ego, it
Yeah,
dissolves that
100%.
layer of pretentiousness. That's the best part of it.
It's humiliating in some way. Or it's
Yeah,
not even necessarily humiliating. It's like it's humbling. It's humbling.
humbling.
It's humbling. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, the quintessential like if there's an image to have in mind of what like a really great experience of art should be, it's the way Nietzsche. I keep quoting this lately. It was really important for me when I learned it. It really changed everything for me. And it's been coming up a lot, and I need to actually just look it up so I can say where it's from. Maybe one of you can find it and tell me. But I
That's
know
cool.
it's there. Nietzsche wrote this. He wrote about Raphael's Transfiguration.
Yeah.
And in Raphael's Transfiguration, Christ is rising from the cross, and below him, just below the rocks where the cross is uh, kind of raised, is a crowd of people who are witnessing it, disciples and townspeople. And among the townspeople is a young boy and everybody's witnessing it. Everybody's watching Christ rise. And the boy is watching it, but he's having an epileptic fit. He's having a seizure. And his dad is holding him because he's collapsed and his eyes are rolling into the back of his head. And what Nietzsche said about this painting is that what the boy is experiencing watching Christ rise is what the viewer is to experience looking at the painting. That there's actually a triangulation going on in the painting, that Christ is transformed from the material world into a realm of purity, that the child is transformed because he's having this epileptic fit at the profundity of his aesthetic experience of witnessing Christ resurrect. And the viewer is meant to have the same transformative elevation as the two of them, which is like out of the mere material reality and into a kind of purity. You know, like you could say that that's what separates like art from like craft, right? Is that
100%, yeah.
art has that transcendental quality to it. Art, at a certain point, the material falls away, you know, and you're really in touch with something that's far more profound. That's what I mean also when I say like art asks for you to have this sort of naive, open aesthetic experience with it, and that's really the only rubric on which it can be judged.
I think that's a great point. And it makes me think a little bit about like the squabbles of contemporary art, contemporary culture.
Mm-hmm.
This art belongs to this group, this belongs to this group.
Mm-hmm.
Like whatever, the debate in techno music, like techno is a black music, techno is a German white European music. It doesn't fucking matter, because when techno it works, it's a form of high art almost, because it's
Mm-hmm.
channeling primitive sound.
Mm-hmm.
It's ancient, and and that feeling doesn't belong to the material world or to flesh at all. It belongs to everyone because it's something that everybody can access, because it's outside it's outside common reality, outside our normal
Yeah,
understanding. It's a feeling that you
definitely,
can't even describe with language. It's just
definitely.
something you know when you feel it.
Oh yeah, 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 totally. Yeah, yeah. I mean, techno is a great example. You know, it's a very Dionysian kind of art form, but maybe not so. Maybe the actual art itself is not so much, but definitely the experience of it tends to be pretty Dionysian
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
If it's done right. Look, I
Yeah,
lived in
yeah, yeah,
Chicago
of
for a little
course.
bit.
Of
There's a
course.
certain way that people now, I'm in LA, people are like, yeah, I'm going to a rave. There are no raves in LA. Let me just say that right now. For anybody who comes to LA, anybody who lives in LA, there are no raves here. I've never seen one. I tried, they don't exist. Go to fucking Chicago. There are raves.
Yeah, yeah,
Those are
yeah, yeah,
raves.
yeah. Where does I'm not even gonna get into that. I'll start chimping out.
All
I think
right.
that's a great place to leave it. We
All
got
right.
about an
Okay.
hour and a
Okay.
half.
Beautiful.
Grant, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you too. I really appreciate it. It's a
And
pleasure.
next time I'm in LA, whenever that is, we'll hang out.
For sure. I'm about to be in New York. I'll text you. Let's
Oh,
kick it.
sick. All right, cool. All right,
All
guys,
right.
have a great night.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
Later.
Bye.